Remember how I introduced our concept of tangential velocity just last video? So if you were to notice, early, we take a tangential velocity and we just go straight from that point. Look at how steep that is right there. However, over time, notice how it's a lot flatter and a lot closer to zero than this line. It rises an extremely quick distance in a very short amount of time, whereas this one does not. Then we come over here, and initially we're not cross covering that much distance over that much time. But down here, it is a lot steeper, except it's in the negative direction. This is a trick question, and likely you might have chosen this one because it looks negative. But in fact, this is the object that is slowing down, and this is the one that is speeding up. So let's go over these types of graphs. So if we were to look at these, anytime you see something where over a period of time the slope gets lower compared to how it started. So right here, the slope is kind of steep. And then over here, it's almost at zero. The premise is that anytime rise over run gets less, no matter the value, so it can be a negative rise over run, if this number is going from, let's say, 8 over 3 to 2 over 3, you'll obviously choose this one as the smaller one compared to this one. You can even kind of see that, like, let's assume this is going -8 down, 3 over. This is going, we'll say it's -2, just for our sake. -2 down, and then 3 over. And you can kind of see that because the slope is decreasing over time, even though it is a negative number, we don't care. We're worried about the magnitude. So you can almost be like, the absolute value of this will be greater than the absolute value of this. This one's a little bit more obvious because it is a positive graph. The one trick is understanding that direction, like I was saying earlier, tells us that anything moving away is a positive direction. The velocity is positive because they're moving up. We're moving away from the origin, away from this line. Whereas the acceleration is negative because it is causing the velocity to go down over time. So v is going down, meaning acceleration is negative. Because each second we go from 9 over 2 to 7 over 2 to 5 over 2. We are having a decrease from each number, which means we are negative. The next one, instead of being a negative or positive direction, it is a negative, went too fast. It is a negative direction, whereas the acceleration is positive. The idea is it started out as -8 over 3, I was saying, and then it eventually got down to -2 over 3. This means there had to have been some number being added between each one. The speeding up one looks a little bit wild, but it isn't too challenging. So in this case, all three are negative. These I think are easier because it's pretty straightforward no matter what. Direction and velocity pretty much are always going the same. It's acceleration that can change. But with these, the velocity, the tangential velocity is starting here, and then by this point, it's a much greater value. Same thing with this one. I'm even going to remove my face so you can look at this. Maybe go over this, take a picture of all this stuff in your notes, and see that over time, velocity is increasing. Hopefully you took the time to write down, pause the video, and write down this whole page, this whole slide. It is very important, and I think it would be great reference. But now I want to show you what these position versus time graphs look like in a velocity versus time manner. So drum roll, please.
It's time for the moment you've been waiting for. Da 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 da
We have velocity versus time. You can see that anything that is slowing down is actually going towards zero velocity. So what this means is that by the time it reaches this line, it has no movement. It is standing still. Whereas up here, it had a much higher value than zero that, because we had a negative acceleration, caused it to reach zero. In this case, it's just the opposite. Instead of being a higher acceleration, it's technically low, or higher velocity, it's technically lower, but with a greater value as it goes towards 0 meters per second. Down here we have a greater value, but this time the acceleration was positive, which caused it to go towards 0. Maybe you're noticing a bit of a trend. How do we know that it's decreasing over time? Or that we have an acceleration that's negative? Oh my goodness, we can take rise over run and find the slope and show that that's a negative acceleration. Here we can take the rise over run and show that it's a positive acceleration. You kind of see that? In this case, we're moving away from the 0. So towards 0 for slowing down. And then I'm going to change colors. And we'll say away from 0. From 0 means it's speeding up. You see how it starts at 0, and by the end, we're at something greater than 0. Same here. The slope, in this case, is negative, which gives us all of these different values. Velocity is on the negative side of the axis. Direction is negative because we have a negative velocity. And acceleration is negative because this slope is negative. Here it's just the opposite, where everything is positive. Hopefully this is starting to make a little bit of sense. The biggest takeaway, I would say, is that slowing down means velocity versus time graph is going towards 0. The position versus time graphs are going to have a slope that goes towards 0. And the exact opposite is happening with speeding up. The velocity versus time graph is each second is getting greater than 0, or in value greater than 0. And we're moving away from that axis. It's the same thing as before, where the speeding up ones were increasing over time, and the slowing down ones were decreasing over time. The two ones that were going in a negative direction, one had a slope approaching 0, the other one had a slope approaching, we could say, infinity. And the opposite was true for speeding up. Still approaching 0, but going in a positive direction. Approaching infinity, but going in a positive direction. Now, here's what they look like together. So slowing down, you see it's approaching 0, approaching 0. The tangential velocity, again, is approaching 0. I'll even draw it on this one. So big, small, approaching 0. Big, small, approaching 0. Great. Last one, for speeding up, we have something that is the opposite, where it's small, big, small, big, small, big, small, big. Acceleration is constant, going in. So the last recording kind of cut off, but basically I just wanted to reiterate the importance of understanding that this acceleration is negative because it has a negative slope, because the rise is going down, whereas this one is positive because the rise is going up. The other thing I want to really stress is the importance of understanding, like I did say, anything moving away from the origin means it's increasing in velocity, and all of the things on this side of the y-axis is going in a negative direction. If the velocities were on this side of the x-axis or the y-axis, they would be going in a positive direction. Even if something is slowing down, just like we saw before. Right here. While these are slowing down, they are still going in a positive direction, and this one is still going in a negative direction because it is on this side of the x-axis, which is the positive, or the y-axis, which is the positive side. This is on the negative side of the y-axis, which is the negative side, showing negative direction. Okay? Going away from the origin means positive direction on the position versus time. Even velocity is easier in my opinion, where anything that is on the positive side of the y-axis is positive direction. Anything on the negative side is negative direction. But to reiterate, anything going towards the origin is negative right here. Anything that is going away is positive.